Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and thank you for joining me for folks' favorite Fandom Friday. Now, every Friday, I get the chance to visit with somebody from the wider world of the Tolkien fandom. Writers and musicians, artists, craftsmen, scholars, content creators, and a whole lot more. Today, I'm pleased to introduce you to a man of many creative talents: musician, actor, storyteller, web designer. It's in that latter role, actually, that I came to know him first, as he stepped up back when the Prancing Pony podcast was going through its big growth phase in the early months of the pandemic, summer of 2020. He is the man behind the curtain for the prancingponypodcast.com, ringswrapup.com, and tolkientimes.com. He's also personally escorted Sauron to jail, but we'll get to that soon enough. Please welcome to today's Tolkien Times, my favorite web guru, Phil Dean.
Kia ora, Alan. Good to see you, man.
It is good to see you, too. We don't get a chance to hang out often enough. Let's get this first question out of the way. Everybody's going to want to know, why did you go to work for the PPP, and what's it like having such a terrible boss? No,
well,
sorry. No, don't answer that. Don't answer that.
I had a whole list.
Actually, I just want to get to the question that I always ask, but honestly, I've forgotten to ask a few recently. How did you first discover Tolkien's works, and what is it that keeps you coming back?
I knew you were going to ask this, so I had to think about this because it's a long time ago.
We are not young men, Phil.
What I recall is that I know I came to The Hobbit first, and I know my mum used to take me to the library on a regular basis when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I think I must have been about 8 or 9, and I picked up The Hobbit. I picked it up because of the cover with the one with the mountains, Tolkien's own.
Oh, okay, yeah,
cover, yeah. The sort of green and blue one,
right.
with the whole scene laid out, and something about that just spoke to me. I was like, I love that picture. This is awesome. There's just so much to imagine that's going on in there, you know. So I picked it up, and I loved the book. And then I remember when I was about 10 or 11. My parents then got me the 3-book set of Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
which was,
wonderful!
In fact, which was this one.
Oh, wow! Oh, that's lovely.
As you can see, it's sort of
it's seen better days.
It's seen better days. The Two Towers, the pages have just all fallen
yeah.
out. But I can't bear to throw it away.
No, of course not.
I can't read it anymore. But I remember just absolutely racing through that and loving it, and it's sort of it went on from there. And I think once I'd reached sort of 16 years old and discovered guitars and bands and beer, I kind of lost. I lost interest. I lost interest for quite a while. I think it was the movies that brought me back to it. The Peter Jackson movies, and they made me realize how much I did love it. And since then, I think a few years after the movies, a friend of mine put me on to Corey Olsen's podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
And
Professor,
I went through and sort of listened to all of those, and just that's what opened my eyes to the real depth of it, and just how much sort of scholarly writing there was about it. And then I just sort of, for a few years, I just voraciously ate all that up, and reading the Tom Shippey stuff and the Verlinfliege stuff and all the usual kind
and it
of
opens
things.
your eyes to all of it. Like every time you read it now, you're learning something new.
Yeah, and I think now now it's been a couple of years since I have read it, but I think when I do go back, it's as you say yourself, and as so many other people say, you do find new things all the time. But I think almost I go back and it's sort of like it's just comforting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been there all my life. It's like having a big warm hug from a book. It's like I'm the same with Terry Pratchett. Like, if I'm really sort of not entirely sure what to read, nothing's there waiting, I'm like, you know what? It's time for another reread of Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion, or and
that's
it's
totally
just
fair.
I just love going back into that world.
Yeah.
So
I certainly understand that. Do it every week.
Yeah.
So back when Amazon's television adaptation of The Rings of Power came to our TV screens, and honestly, it's hard to think that that was a year and a half ago now, I saw a familiar
Yeah.
face in a few scenes. It turns out
Yeah.
you played a hugely important role in season 1 of the show. Now, what can you tell us
I
about that experience without risking your professional career or all of your assets?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I was possibly the most important part of that series. My sort of 2 or 3 minutes screen time was
Combined. Yeah.
stole the show. They couldn't put me on
No.
any longer, or else it would have just
Would have
overshadowed the
literally
rest of the
stolen the show.
cast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was actually I was living in New Zealand
Mhm.
when Jackson was doing the films.
Yeah.
And the sort of kind of perhaps not pre-internet, but effectively pre-internet.
Yeah.
There wasn't not a lot really happening, and I was
No.
completely unaware that he was doing it. It wasn't until too late that I found out that I'd been living in New Zealand for a year with no job, looking for work on
Oh,
a regular
no.
basis and not finding any, and then finding out years later that Jackson was down the road filming these movies, crying out for people in the movies.
Yeah.
And I missed that chance. So when it turned out that I was moving back to New Zealand
Yeah.
at about the same time as Amazon were sort of filming, I'm like, man, I've got to get in this one. I'm not missing out this time.
Yeah.
So I signed up with an agency for sort of extras and acting, and a couple of days later, I got a text saying, would you be interested in working on Lord of the Rings? I'm like, yeah, I would.
Let me think about that. Yes.
I think I'm more interested than anyone else in doing this. So sign me up. So
you were a hard sell, I'm sure.
Yeah. And obviously they paid me. If they'd have asked, I'd have done it without any pay at all.
I'm sure.
So yeah, and you don't know what's going to happen.
No.
And I've not been on films before. I've been in the music industry most of my life, and I've done all sorts of things with that. But film is an entirely new medium to me, really.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what to expect. And I went to a couple of costume fittings, and they started measuring me up and putting all these clothes on, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty exciting. But I had no idea what. Like the rest of us.
You're too tall for a hobbit, so it must have been Númenórean
too tall for a hobbit
at this point.
Too old and grizzly now for an elf. So yeah, it was going to be a human. But again, I had no idea what I was gonna be doing, because the thing's shrouded in secrecy. As you'll know yourself, the fandom, we just knew nothing at that point. This is going back to the start of 2021, and I think all that had been released at that point were the maps.
Yep, the John Howe maps that were mysterious and enigmatic. Yes.
Yeah, we had a feeling that there might be something to do with Númenor, and we were kind of guessing Second Age seemed likely, but that was all we really knew. And so by the time I got to the first day on set, I'm like, okay, where am I? And I'm looking at all this through the eyes of an avid Tolkien fan, which of course nobody else is on set.
That's just wild to me that nobody else there in New Zealand, where you all shot Jackson's Lord of the Rings, that you were like the only real Lord of the Rings fan there.
I think that's probably a little bit going a little bit too far, but there's hundreds, probably thousands of people milling around on this set, and you only speak to the people that you're kind of working with yourself.
True.
And none of those, there's a couple of people who had read Lord of the Rings, but most of them are just there doing it as an actor. And to be honest, if you're in Auckland, you go out in Auckland for the day and chat to a few people, you're almost guaranteed to bump into someone who was on it, because just everyone was like, there was no qualifications needed. You was just like, yep, sign them up, get them in.
Warm body, let's get you out there.
Put them in a costume, job done. But so I'm there on set, and I know that I'm dressed up as I've got no pointy ears and no
hairy feet.
No hairy feet. So I'm thinking, well, I'm definitely a person. I'm a human person.
Yeah.
And then the first set that I walk on is this great big sort of dock scene, sort of stone dock with a big swimming pool kind of thing in front of me that is obviously representing the harbour. And then this one of the cast comes on who's, this beautiful long blonde hair and tiny little lady, but not Hobbit tiny, but still quite small. And I'm like, oh, well, that's that woman who's supposed to be playing Galadriel, isn't it? And then I hear someone say the name, and I'm like, okay, that's Galadriel.
Yeah.
So she's the only elf here. Well, I don't know where I am, but I must be I'm thinking somewhere like one of the coastal cities in Middle Earth. And it's not until later in the day when I'm sort of I hear someone refer to this regal looking person as Pharazôn. I'm like, got it. Okay, now I know. Now I know where we are.
Yeah,
and then I'm like, right, I'm in hang on, that's Galadriel, and I'm in...
Yeah. What's Galadriel doing in Númenor? Wait a minute.
What's going? And at that point on day one, I'm like, okay, I need to revise my expectations here.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this for what it is.
They're filling in a lot of blanks. Galadriel did not have a diary that Tolkien wrote telling us what she did every day. So maybe.
I'm not going to be the guy who's saying, oh, hang on, blah, blah, blah. So you got to do what you tell the story you got to tell and do what you got to do.
Excuse me, Mr. Director.
Yeah.
Page. Yeah. You're not going to be that guy. Yeah. Because then you're going to be gone. Yeah.
But there's a part of me that's like, oh, no. And then let's just go with this.
Yep.
This looks amazing. And this is great fun. Let's just see what happens.
That's amazing.
And from then on, it only got more and more confusing because, as I've found out from future work on...
I'm sure it did.
You kind of imagine when you're making a film or a TV show that, okay, let's film this. Right. And then after that, this happens. So let's film that. And it's like, no. First film, they basically filmed everything in reverse.
Yeah.
So you've got no idea. It wasn't until I see it on the screen that okay, that's what we were doing. I had no idea. First thing I saw was Galadriel leaving Númenor.
Oh my goodness, that was the very first scene that you...
Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of late in the show.
So, I'm standing there in 25 kilos of armor at the end of summer, outdoors with no shade. Just
sweating like mad.
Yeah. And everywhere, there's all these people that are there, the general populace around the docks. So they're sort of wearing some rags and barefoot and everything. And you're sitting there and you've got this awesome costume, but you realize that it's not all awesome at that point.
No.
And they're coming.
Might be better to be some poor dock worker with some nice light cotton clothes. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and they're coming around. They're shoving like all this sort of. I mean, the armor's plastic, but it still weighs a ton. And they're coming around and they're putting in ice packs under your costumes to try and cool you down, which is brilliant for about 10 minutes. And then it the hot pack. What was quite worrying, I'm still mildly worried about the fact that they put all these in, but they didn't always come out. You'd get home and I had 2 ice packs in there.
Where'd that ice pack go?
I've absorbed the ice pack into my very being.
Yeah.
Oh man,
that is worrying. Actually,
frightening. And that's why I'm the way I am now.
So tell us about that one scene, the one that I know you and I talked about a little bit after it happened, which was you actually are responsible for putting Sauron in jail?
Yeah, that was kind of cool, but I had no idea.
No, none of us did.
Who that was at the time. You remember that room that we're
sort of that throne room,
sort of round throne room kind of thing. It's got all these naked flames burning away in there, and that's real. They were setting the fire in there, and they got all the studio lighting on top of that.
So it must have been a sauna in there,
blistering hot. And, you've got Sauron and Galadriel in their rags.
Yeah,
and then you were there in your armor and everything. Yeah. So you're just dying. It's just dripping with sweat every time you do something. And we've got this. We've got that scene where I have to sort of walk down from the top. Pharazôn calls me over, and then I've got to march Galadriel and Sauron off the set, up the stairs, and notionally off to jail.
Right.
So we've done that a few times, partly because of me, because what I had to do was get down to the floor where they were, which meant that I had to climb down some stairs, but some of the steps weren't really steps, and they were like a 2-foot drop, and you're in armor with a spear.
Oh,
and it's not easy. Not easy
to do that gracefully and not look like you're just stumbling down.
Gracefully and silently. Gosh, it's a few takes later. I'm like, yeah, sorry guys, and then we eventually get down there, and I've sort of done this a couple of times, and I've walked Galadriel off towards the stairs, and then they do the cut, and as soon as they've stopped filming and they've cut, and 8 or 9 people just descend upon Morpeth Clark, Galadriel, with makeup and the costumes, and they're preening her and doing all the wipe the sweat off her, give her a fan, give her an ice drink. I'm standing right next to her in full armor, being ignored by everybody.
From heat stroke.
Ready to collapse. I've got sweat just pouring down into my eyes. I can do nothing about it because I've got a huge helmet on, and I can just about move my arm up to feed myself or get a drink, but I can't sort of. Oh my God. Man. And at that point, that point was my favorite moment, because that's when everyone else had ignored me, but Galadriel turned, saw me, Morpeth, or Myth, as everyone had called her on set, and she's just looked at me and seen me sweating, and she's got one of those little handheld fans, and she goes, "You look like you're really struggling. Can I have this? Like, this is a gift. Just take this."
A gift of Galadriel.
Awesome. I'm calling down. Yeah, and then seconds later, I'm like, "Oh my God, I just got a gift from Galadriel." At least 3,000 years before Gimli did. I'm like, screw you,
and Gimli. A lot more useful than 3 hairs. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I
took that.
Awesome.
I took that fan, and I've now encased it in an Arkenstone
imperishable crystal. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that was like the highlight.
I asked her for 1 fan blade. She gave me 3. All right, man. That is.
And then we
cool.
Then we walked. We did the shots with Sarah walking him off the stairs, and we got no idea who.
No. I mean, who is this guy? He's a king of something or other. That's what he says. But yeah.
Yeah, and similarly, there's other characters. Like I was doing a lot of scenes with the dude playing Lloyd. Lloyd Owen.
Oh yeah, Lloyd Owen.
Playing Elendil. I had no idea who that was. I've had a chat with the armor guy who's got his sword, and I've had a look at his sword and stuff. And I go, "Oh well, this is cool." But I've got no idea who the characters are, because everyone's got code names. So you just got no idea.
For security reasons, right? They don't want you telling.
And it's anybody. It's only much later that I've been able to piece everything together, and obviously when I finally saw it, I'm like, okay. But I was on and off on the set for about 3 months, and it was towards the end I was beginning to piece it together. And when I was piecing it together, I was telling other people as I did so, and most people would say, "Yeah, we don't care, mate." And the other people, "Don't tell me this." I'm like, well, of course, what happens is the queen that you're seeing, she's forced to marry. She's actually cousins with this Pharazôn dude, and he forces her to. Don't tell me. Yes, sorry, the curse of knowing the story. But then you're telling them, you're telling them other stuff, and of course that never happens.
No, and then you might tell somebody else, but if that somebody else has a podcast, they can't say anything about it, because then you'd lose your job.
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly didn't tell anyone else. I just wouldn't have anyone to tell.
No, of course. What great stories, man. I wish we actually had you for longer. I want to ask one other question, though, that's totally unrelated to your time on the Rings of Power. And yes, I think we will really actually have to have you come back and tell more stories, because I bet you got a bunch more. Here's the thing. You're also, as you mentioned before, a musician. You're quite the musician, and really you're producer / sound engineer / band manager / really one-man band in many ways.
Yeah, jack of all trades, master of nothing. That's me.
Exactly. I hear that. You're calling me out, man.
Yeah.
Now, I honestly hope folks check out all your music, and we'll put some links in the show notes and captions. But there's a Middle-earth related song that I want you to tell us about. You wrote and recorded this really cool sea shanty called "Bound for Númenor." It's awesome. I got to say, folks, we're gonna make sure there's a link to it. What inspired you, Phil, to do this sea shanty? Tell us just a little bit about the process. I mean, sea shanties kind of are a lost art after all.
Yeah, well, very much so. And but the band, when I was in Melbourne in Australia, I was in a band like I had a folk rock punkish kind of band.
Okay.
Thinking people like the Pogues and that kind of thing. And from about 2008 to about 2015, we were doing we were really busy. We were doing hundreds of shows, and we were doing my own songs, but we were also doing quite a lot of traditional folk stuff.
Okay.
And that sort of moved into sea shanties. I discovered that most of my heritage on my father's side was sailors and boat builders in the southwest of England.
Okay.
So I sort of had it in the blood, or felt like I did. So I found all these fantastic old folk songs, and we'd rearrange them, maybe update the lyrics a little bit so they're a little bit more contemporary. And so I was really used to playing all these sort of sea shanty-esque folk numbers.
Okay.
Like foot stomping, hand clapping, danceable, rocking numbers. So when I was on the Númenórean set, I'm seeing all the sea guards that they had, and the boat and things. And I'm thinking, they need a sea shanty.
Yeah, they do.
And initially, I'm thinking I'm going to do this, and I'm going to give it to them, see if I can get in the show. But that never happened for a number of reasons. But so it was inspired by feeling like I was an honorary Númenórean.
Yeah,
and I think I've got it. I've gone through that chapter in the Silmarillion, or Silmarillion? I think it's in the Silmarillion, where they sort of describe all the geography of Númenor. So I've gone through and made a load of notes.
Unfinished Tales, actually, I'm thinking is maybe where you're thinking of. Númenor too, though. I mean,
we should know this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Akalabeth talks about it, but I know that in my brain, most of my knowledge of the geography of Númenor and the boat building and all that, the shipbuilding, all comes from Unfinished Tales, both the chapter of Númenor, but then also the story of Aldarion and Arendis, which tells us a lot about their shipbuilding and their mariner nature. Yeah.
So I just sort of merged that kind of little notes from the text in with, I was so used to writing songs or editing songs and rearranging them that used all this sort of seafaring vocabulary. So it was just second nature to me to come up with that. And people have loved it. I got so much nice feedback about that from Tolkien fans. It was really cool. I'd done a song a few years previous based on the Mythopoeia poem.
Wow.
Which I don't think anyone really sort of picked up on at the time.
I don't think I've known about this, and I've known you. I've been working with you for 4 years almost.
Yeah, it sort of inspired one of my favorite songs that I've of my own that I've written.
Okay, we're gonna have to find out more about that.
And I think I did. I think I sent you possibly at some point lyrics from another song that I'd written about Tolkien himself.
Yes, that I think I remember. Mm-hmm.
It's still on the pile of things to do, and I'll get there one day.
Of course it is. That's great stuff, man. Yeah. Well, we got to get folks to listen to that sea shanty. It is a lot of fun. I remember when it first came out, we were all just thrilled to hear it. It's a great piece. But this has been such a fun chat, but I've got to have you back. I mean, I want to hear more about what happened in Númenor.
Anytime, man.
Yeah, definitely. In the meantime, Phil, thank you so much for joining me here on the TTT today.
Absolute pleasure.
Now get back to work.
Will do.
Folks, that is it for today's Fandom Friday, but please come back next time for another Fandom Friday to meet another of your fellow Tolkien fans and maybe even learn what niches of the community you might be interested in exploring. And if you're interested in joining me here for a future Fandom Friday, don't worry, you don't have to work for me. Just let me know by emailing barnum@theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a whole lot more. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we wrap up this week with Silmarillion Saturday. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications. And please follow or subscribe on your podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.